My daughter-in-law hosted my son's birthday on my farm for 60 people, yet I wasn't invited. The farm had never been just land. It was not simply fields, fences, or buildings standing in the sun and rain. For her, it was life itself. Every corner carried a memory. Every tree had been planted by hand. Every worn path had been walked 1,000 times, sometimes with tired feet, sometimes with a hopeful heart. She had given her youth, her strength, and many quiet tears to this place. Long before it became something others admired, it had been her responsibility, her pride, and her shelter. Hit that subscribe button and tap the bell icon so you never miss our latest uploads. She had come to the farm as a young woman with more dreams than money. Back then, the house was smaller, the roof leaked when it rained, and the land looked wild and stubborn. People said it would be easier to sell and move closer to town. She refused. She believed that if she stayed patient and worked hard, the land would give back more than it took. Over the years, she proved herself right. The farm grew slowly, season by season, just like her family. Her son had grown up running across these fields. His first steps were taken on the old wooden porch. His scraped knees were cleaned in the kitchen sink. His laughter once echoed across the barns while she watched from a distance, pretending not to worry. Every birthday, every holiday, every big family moment happened here. It was never questioned. The farm was home, and home was where the family gathered. When her husband passed away years ago, the farm became even more important. It was the last place they had stood side by side, planning the future. She stayed strong because she believed the land needed her, and her son needed a steady place to return to. She worked through grief with soil under her nails and sun on her face. She kept the farm running, not just for herself, but for the family name tied to it. As time passed, her son grew older, moved out, and built a life of his own. He married, started a family, and visited less often than before. She understood. Life moves forward, and children do not stay forever. Still, she kept the farm ready, always clean, always welcoming. In her mind, it was still the center of the family, even if others seemed to forget that. One quiet afternoon, while scrolling through her phone, she noticed something that made her pause. A neighbor had shared a post online. It showed bright decorations, tables being set, and words that caught her breath. A birthday celebration. A big one. 60 guests. And the location was clearly mentioned. Her farm. At first, she smiled. Surely it was a mistake. Maybe someone had posted too early, or maybe her son was planning a surprise and wanted to tell her later. She put the phone down and went back to her chores, brushing the thought aside. The farm had always been used for family events. Why would this be any different? But as the day went on, small doubts started to creep in. No one had called. No one had asked if the date worked for her. No one had checked if the farm was ready or if she needed help. That was unusual. In the past, planning anything on the farm meant sitting at a kitchen table, talking things through, and respecting her role as the owner and caretaker. That evening, she checked her phone again. More posts had appeared. Friends of her daughter-in-law were commenting, tagging others, and talking excitedly about the party. They mentioned music, food trucks, and games for kids. It was clear this was not a small gathering. This was a full celebration, planned with confidence, as if permission had already been given. She felt a strange mix of emotions. Confusion came first. Then hurt. Then a quiet sadness that settled deep in her chest. How could something like this be planned without a single word to her? This was not a rented hall or a public park. This was her land. Her home. Her life's work. She tried to give them the benefit of the doubt. Maybe her son thought she already knew. Maybe her daughter-in-law assumed he had talked to her. She told herself not to jump to conclusions. Families misunderstand each other all the time. A simple conversation could fix this. The next day, she waited. She expected a call, a message, or even a visit. Nothing came. The silence felt louder than any argument. She went about her routine, feeding the animals, checking the fences, and watering the plants, but her mind was elsewhere. Each task felt heavier than usual. The farm, once a place of comfort, now felt different. She looked at the open space where tents were planned and imagined strangers walking across it. People who did not know the history of the land. People who did not know how much effort it took to keep everything running. She wondered if they would treat it with care or see it as just another party spot. Later that afternoon, a neighbor stopped by. The neighbor spoke casually, smiling, and mentioned how exciting the upcoming party sounded. She nodded politely, not trusting her voice. The neighbor assumed she was involved in the planning and praised her for hosting such a big event. Hearing those words made her heart sink even more. After the neighbor left, she sat alone on the porch. The sun was setting, painting the sky in soft colors. This was the same porch where she had once watched her son blow out birthday candles as a child. Back then, birthdays were simple. A homemade cake, a few relatives, and laughter that felt real and warm. She thought about how things had changed. The farm had grown, and so had expectations. Somewhere along the way, respect had quietly slipped away. It wasn't just about the party. It was about feeling unseen, unasked, and unimportant in a place she had built from nothing. She checked her phone one more time that night. Still no message from her son. Still no explanation. She did not want to believe that he would intentionally leave her out. Yet the evidence was hard to ignore. Plans were moving forward without her, as if she were no longer part of the picture. Sleep did not come easily. Her mind replayed memories of years gone by. She remembered carrying her son inside after long days outside. She remembered teaching him the value of hard work and respect. She wondered when that lesson had faded. In the quiet of the night, she made a promise to herself. She would not cause a scene. She would not embarrass anyone. But she would not stay silent either. This farm was her legacy, and she deserved to be acknowledged. Whatever happened next, she knew one thing for sure. This was no simple misunderstanding anymore. It was the beginning of something that would change how she saw her family, and how they saw her. The next morning began like any other, but something inside her felt unsettled. She woke early as she always did, and sat at the small table by the window with her phone in her hand. The habit had become automatic. Before making tea, before stepping outside, she checked her messages. Nothing. No missed calls. No new emails. No unread texts. Just silence. She told herself to stay calm. There had to be an explanation. Maybe the invitation had been sent to the wrong number. Maybe her phone had glitched. These things happened. Still, she refreshed her inbox, checked her spam folder, and even restarted her phone. Everything worked just fine. The problem was not the phone. As the day went on, more details about the party appeared online. She did not search for them. They appeared on her screen without effort, shared by people she barely knew. One post mentioned the caterer. Another showed boxes of decorations stacked neatly in a living room that was not hers. Someone commented about how thoughtful it was to host such a big party on a beautiful private farm. She read each word slowly, her chest tightening with every new detail. 60 guests. Professional catering. Custom decorations. This was not something planned overnight. It took time, money, and many conversations. Conversations that never included her. She tried to stay busy, hoping work would quiet her thoughts. She cleaned the barns, swept the porch, and trimmed the hedges along the driveway. Normally, these tasks brought peace. Today, they only reminded her how much effort it took to keep the farm presentable. She wondered if anyone planning the party understood that. By midday, she sat down again with her phone. She checked her messages for the 5th time that hour. Still nothing. The absence of an invitation now felt heavy, like a door quietly closed in her face. It was no longer just confusing. It was painful. She thought about calling her son. The idea came and went several times. She did not want to sound accusing. She did not want to start a fight. She wanted to believe that he would explain everything soon, that he would realize the mistake and fix it. Instead of calling, she waited. She waited through lunch, through the afternoon heat, through another round of chores. Each hour that passed made the silence harder to ignore. It became clear that if they wanted her involved, they would have reached out by now. Late in the afternoon, a message popped up on her phone. For a moment, her heart lifted. But it was not from her son. It was from someone she barely knew, asking about parking arrangements for the party. The message was polite, casual, and confident, as if she were already part of the planning team. Her hands trembled as she read it. This person assumed she had agreed. Assumed she had been informed. Assumed she was hosting willingly. The truth was the opposite. She did not reply right away. She placed the phone face down on the table and stared at the wall. The feeling that washed over her was not anger at first. It was sadness. A deep, aching sadness that made her feel small in her own home. She began to see the situation more clearly. This was not an accident. Too many details were settled. Too many people were involved. An invitation was not forgotten. It was never intended. Her thoughts turned to her daughter-in-law. Over the years, their relationship had been polite but distant. There had been moments of tension, small disagreements that were never fully discussed. She had always chosen peace, biting her tongue for the sake of family harmony. She remembered times when suggestions were ignored, when decisions were made without her input. She had told herself it was just a new generation doing things their own way. But this felt different. This felt personal. The realization hurt more than she expected. Being excluded was one thing. Being deliberately left out was another. It meant someone had decided she did not matter enough to include, even when it came to her own land. She opened social media again, against her better judgment. There it was. A post from her daughter-in-law, cheerful and bright, thanking friends for helping plan the event. She scrolled through the comments. Names she did not recognize. Smiling faces. Excited words. Not once was she mentioned. Her chest tightened, and she felt a sting behind her eyes. She blinked it away, refusing to cry. She had survived harder things than this. Still, the hurt was real, and it cut deeper with every passing minute. She thought back to all the times she had stepped aside, letting others take the lead. She had done it out of love, not weakness. But now, it seemed her silence had been mistaken for permission. That evening, she finally called her son. The phone rang several times before he answered. His voice sounded distracted. She asked gently about the upcoming birthday celebration. There was a pause on the line. A long one. He spoke carefully, choosing his words. Yes, there was a party planned. Yes, it was on the farm. He sounded as if he expected her to already know. When she asked why no one had told her, his answer was vague. He said plans had moved quickly. He said he assumed she was aware. She listened quietly, hearing what was not being said. He did not apologize. He did not seem surprised by her confusion. It became clear that the decision had not been his alone. When she mentioned feeling left out, he grew uncomfortable. He said he did not want to get caught in the middle. Those words hurt more than anything else. Being his mother, being the owner of the farm, apparently placed her on the outside. After the call ended, she sat in silence. The truth settled in slowly but firmly. This was deliberate. Someone had chosen to move forward without her consent, without her presence, and without her respect. She realized that the invitation she kept waiting for was never coming. Not because it was lost, but because it was never sent. The wound that formed was quiet but deep. It was not about a party anymore. It was about being erased from a story she had helped write. As night fell, she stood on the porch again, looking out over the land. The farm remained unchanged, steady and familiar. It reminded her of who she was and what she had built. No one could take that away, no matter how invisible they tried to make her feel. She took a deep breath, feeling a shift inside her. The waiting was over. The pretending was over. She would no longer assume good intentions where none were shown. What came next would not be easy, but she knew one thing with certainty. She would not allow her life's work to be used while she stood quietly in the background. The invitation never came, but clarity did. And with it, the strength to face whatever followed. She did not sleep much that night. Her mind stayed busy, replaying the call again and again. Every pause, every careful word her son had chosen sat heavy in her thoughts. By morning, she felt tired in a way that rest could not fix. Still, she got up, dressed, and stepped outside. The farm did not wait for feelings. The air was cool, and the ground felt firm beneath her boots. She walked slowly, letting the quiet settle her. 4 years, this land had been where she found answers. She hoped it would help her now. By mid-morning, she decided she could not carry this alone anymore. Avoiding the truth would only make it worse. She picked up her phone and called her son again. This time he answered quickly, but his voice sounded tense, as if he had expected the call. She spoke calmly. She told him she needed honesty, not excuses. She asked him to explain how a large event could be planned on her farm without her knowledge. She waited. There was a long silence on the other end. Not the kind caused by a bad connection, but the kind filled with thoughts being carefully arranged. Finally, he spoke. He admitted that his wife had planned everything. She had taken charge from the beginning. She had chosen the date, invited the guests, booked the food, and ordered the decorations. He said it happened quickly. He said he went along with it. Her chest tightened. She asked why he never stopped it. Why did he never say, "We need to talk to my mother first"? His answer came quietly. She said it would be easier this way. The words hit her harder than she expected. Easier for whom? She wanted to ask, but she already knew the answer. Easier for them. Easier without questions. Easier without her voice. She stayed silent, giving him space to continue. He explained that his wife worried she would disagree or want things done differently. He said she did not want stress before the birthday. He said he did not want to argue. Each sentence felt like another small door closing. She realized that somewhere along the way, her involvement had become something to avoid rather than value. She asked him if he agreed with what was done. He hesitated. That hesitation told her everything. He did not fully agree, but he did not fully defend her either. He was standing in the middle, trying not to upset anyone, even if it meant hurting her. For the first time, she felt unsure of her place in his life. She had always believed that no matter how busy or distant he became, the bond between them was steady. Now, it felt fragile. She remembered times when he had come to her for advice, when her opinion mattered. She remembered late-night talks and shared worries. When had that changed? When had her presence become something inconvenient? She asked him if he understood how this made her feel. He sighed and said he did, but his tone lacked conviction. He sounded worn down, as if this was just another problem he wanted to get past. That realization hurt deeply. She was no longer a priority. She was a problem to manage. She told him she was not angry about a party. She was hurt by being excluded from decisions about her own home. She told him respect mattered more than convenience. He listened but did not promise anything. He said he would talk to his wife. He said he hoped she would understand. His words felt uncertain, like he was trying to calm a situation rather than fix it. After the call ended, she sat quietly for a long time. The phone rested in her hand, but she did not look at it. Something inside her had shifted. It was subtle, but it was real. She began to question the past. Moments that once seemed small now looked different. Times when plans were made without her. Times when her suggestions were brushed aside. She had told herself it was nothing. Now she wondered how long it had been happening. She walked through the house, touching familiar objects. The kitchen table where homework was once spread out. The hallway where height marks were scratched into the wall. The living room where laughter used to fill the space. Had she been slowly pushed aside while believing everything was fine? The thought made her chest ache. She had given so much of herself to her family without expecting anything in return. Respect was not too much to ask. Later that afternoon, she received a short message from her son. He said he had spoken to his wife. He said things were tense. He asked for patience. She stared at the message. Patience. That word had followed her for years. Be patient. Be understanding. Be flexible. She wondered when patience turned into silence. She did not reply right away. She needed time to think. For once, she chose herself over keeping the peace. She went outside again, walking the length of the fields. The sun was high now, warm against her skin. She reminded herself that the farm still belonged to her. That had not changed. Yet her role in her son's life clearly had. She felt grief, not loud or dramatic, but steady and heavy. It was the grief of realizing that relationships can shift quietly, without warning, until one day you barely recognize them. That evening, she cooked a simple meal and ate alone. She noticed how quiet the house felt. It had been this way for some time, but tonight it felt different. The silence carried meaning. She thought about boundaries. She had never been good at setting them. She believed love meant giving and trusting. Now she saw that without boundaries, people decide for you. Her son was not a bad person. She knew that. He was tired, pulled in different directions, trying to please everyone. But in doing so, he had let someone else decide her place. As night settled in, she stood by the window and looked out at the land once more. The farm had survived storms, droughts, and years of hard labor. She had survived too. She understood now that waiting for others to protect her role was pointless. If she wanted respect, she would have to claim it herself. The shift inside her was quiet but firm. She was no longer just hurt. She was aware. And awareness brought strength. Her son was caught in the middle, but she no longer planned to stay at the edges of her own life. Whatever came next, she would face it with clarity and resolve. For the first time, she stopped asking herself why she had been excluded. Instead, she asked a more important question. How long had she allowed it to happen? Morning came with a strange stillness. The sky was clear, and the air felt light, as if nothing unusual was about to happen. She woke early as always, but her body felt heavier than usual. Today was the day. The day she had not been invited to. The day her own home would be filled with people who did not even know her. She made her tea and stood by the window, looking out over the land. The farm looked peaceful, almost innocent. The grass moved gently with the breeze, and the driveway lay empty for now. It was hard to believe that within hours, it would be crowded with cars and strangers. She told herself she did not have to be there. She could leave for the day. She could visit a friend or run errands in town. No one had asked her to host, so she had no obligation to watch it happen. But something inside her would not let her walk away. This was her land. Her life's work. If people were coming, she needed to see it with her own eyes. She went about her morning routine slowly. She fed the animals, checked the water lines, and locked the storage shed. Each task grounded her, reminding her that she still belonged here, no matter how others treated her. By late morning, she heard the first sound of tires on gravel. She paused, standing still, listening. A car turned into the driveway. Then another. And another. She stepped back, moving toward the edge of the field where she could see without being seen. From there, she watched as guests arrived in groups. They smiled, laughed, and waved to each other. Some carried wrapped gifts. Others unloaded trays of food and boxes of decorations. No one looked around for her. They walked freely across the land, as if it were a public place. Shoes pressed into grass she had cared for years. Cars parked wherever space allowed. A few people commented on how beautiful the farm was, How lucky the family was to have such a space. She felt invisible. A truck pulled in carrying rented equipment. Tables, chairs, sound equipment. She watched as workers set everything up, following directions given by someone else. That someone else was not her. She recognized her daughter-in-law's voice in the distance. Bright, confident, in charge, giving instructions as if she owned the place. The sound made her stomach tighten. She stayed where she was, unseen, letting the moment sink in. The contrast was painful. Laughter filled the air, but she felt no joy. Music played softly as a test run, while she stood alone with her thoughts. She remembered all the times she had hosted gatherings here. She remembered preparing food late into the night, cleaning every corner, and greeting guests at the gate. She had always been present, always involved. Today, she was a stranger on her own land. More cars arrived. Children ran across the grass, chasing each other. Parents followed, distracted, assuming someone else was responsible. No one asked where the owner was. No one questioned anything. She noticed small things others ignored. A car parked too close to the fence. Someone placing heavy equipment on soft ground. A child climbing on a structure not meant for play. Each sight added to the tightness in her chest. This was not carelessness. This was what happens when people treat something as theirs without earning it. She felt a mix of emotions rise inside her. Hurt, yes. Anger, quietly growing. But also clarity. The situation was no longer abstract or emotional. It was real and unfolding right in front of her. She stepped back toward the house, choosing a different path that led closer to the gathering. She did not rush. She walked with purpose, her back straight, her steps steady. As she approached, she heard conversations clearly. Guests talked about how generous it was to have the party here. Someone joked about how lucky they were to get such a nice venue for free. Another laughed and said it felt like a resort. The words stung. She reached the edge of the crowd and stopped. For a moment, no one noticed her. She stood there, plain and quiet, while the celebration continued around her. It felt unreal, like watching a scene from someone else's life. Then someone turned and saw her. Their smile faltered. Confusion crossed their face. "Oh," the person said slowly. "I didn't know you'd be here." The words were not meant to be cruel, but they landed heavily. She nodded politely, saying nothing. That small exchange confirmed everything she already knew. Her presence was unexpected, unplanned. She saw her son across the space. He noticed her then, his expression changing instantly. Surprise, worry, guilt. He started walking toward her but stopped when someone spoke to him. He looked torn, unsure of what to do. Her daughter-in-law noticed her next. The smile on her face froze for just a second before returning, forced and thin. She approached with quick steps. "Hi," she said, her voice tight. "I didn't realize you'd be coming today." The sentence said more than she probably intended. She met her gaze calmly. "It's my home," she replied softly. There was an awkward pause. People nearby sensed tension and drifted away, pretending to check on food or decorations. The music continued, cheerful and unaware. She looked around at the tables, the gifts, the guests. All of it had been arranged without her consent, without her involvement. In that moment, something inside her settled. The doubt was gone. The hesitation was gone. She understood now that staying silent would only teach others that this was acceptable. She thought of the years she had spent putting others first, of the patience she had shown, of the boundaries she had never drawn. All of it had led to this moment. Her son finally reached her side. He looked uncomfortable, his eyes searching hers. She saw the boy she had raised and the man he had become, standing somewhere between loyalty and avoidance. She did not raise her voice. She did not make a scene. She simply spoke clearly. "We need to talk," she said. The words were calm, but they carried weight. She looked at her daughter-in-law and then at her son. This should have been discussed before today. Silence fell between them. Not loud, but noticeable. Guests nearby began to sense something was wrong. Conversations slowed. A few people glanced over, curious. She felt her heart beat faster, but she did not back down. This was not about embarrassment. This was about respect. "I won't stand quietly while my home is treated like it belongs to everyone but me," she continued, her voice steady. Her daughter-in-law opened her mouth as if to respond, then closed it again. Her son looked down, ashamed. For the first time that day, the celebration felt fragile. She realized then that speaking up did not mean being cruel. It meant being honest. It meant protecting what mattered. The betrayal she felt sharpened into resolve. She was no longer watching from a distance. She was present, seen, and heard. Whatever happened next, she knew one thing for certain. She would not disappear from her own life again. The day had arrived, and with it, her decision to stop being silent. She stood still for a moment after speaking, letting the quiet stretch just long enough to be felt. The music played on, but it sounded distant now, like it belonged to another place. She could feel eyes on her, curious but unsure. She did not look at them. This moment was not for the crowd. Inside, something had settled. The tight knot of confusion and hurt that had followed her for days was gone. In its place was calm. Not the kind that comes from giving up, but the kind that comes from knowing exactly where you stand. She reminded herself of one simple truth. This was her land. Not borrowed. Not shared. Hers. Every inch of it existed because she had protected it, paid for it, and worked it year after year. No celebration, no matter how joyful, changed that. She took a slow breath and stepped slightly away from the gathering. She did not want raised voices or whispered gossip. She wanted clarity. Calm always carried more weight than anger. Her son followed her without being asked. He looked relieved to be moving away from the crowd, but also uneasy. His wife hesitated, then came too, her steps stiff, her smile gone. They stopped near the edge of the yard, far enough that others could not hear, close enough that the music still floated through the air. It was a strange balance, but fitting. She spoke first, keeping her voice low and steady. "I want to be very clear," she said. "I'm not here to argue. I'm here to decide what happens on my property." Her son nodded slowly. He said nothing. She turned slightly toward his wife, not with anger, but with firmness. "This event was planned without my knowledge or permission. That cannot be ignored." Her daughter-in-law crossed her arms, defensive. She began to explain, saying there was no bad intention, that everything was already arranged, that guests were here now. Her words came quickly, layered with stress. She listened without interrupting. When the explanation ended, she spoke again. "Intent does not erase impact," she said quietly. "And convenience does not replace respect." The words landed heavily. There was no accusation in them, just truth. She looked at her son. "You grew up here. You know what this place means. You also know that decisions like this were never made without discussion." He looked down, then back up. His voice was soft. He admitted he should have spoken up sooner. He admitted he chose the easier path. She did not scold him. She did not need to. His discomfort said enough. She felt no need to prove herself anymore. The power she held did not come from shouting or threats. It came from ownership, history, and clarity. She made her decision then. Not impulsively. Not emotionally. But deliberately. "The party will not continue as planned," she said. Both of them looked at her, startled. She raised a hand gently, signaling she was not finished. "I'm not asking everyone to leave right now. I won't embarrass anyone. But changes will be made." She explained calmly. The music would be turned off. Any rented equipment would be removed by early evening. No further activities would take place without her approval. And most importantly, no future events would ever be planned on the farm without her direct consent. Her daughter-in-law protested quietly, saying how difficult it would be, how people would be disappointed. She met her gaze steadily. Disappointment is temporary. Disrespect lasts much longer. The words were not harsh, but they were final. She added one more thing. After today, we will talk, properly. About boundaries. About communication. About what is and is not acceptable. Her son swallowed hard. He nodded again, more firmly this time. She felt a strange sense of relief wash over her. The decision once made felt lighter than all the waiting and wondering that had come before it. They returned toward the gathering together. The change in atmosphere was immediate. The music stopped. Conversations slowed. People noticed the shift, though few understood it. She did not explain herself to the guests. She did not owe them that. Her authority did not require an audience. Some people looked confused. Others looked uncomfortable. A few whispered. None of it mattered. She moved through the space with quiet confidence, speaking briefly to the workers, thanking them, and explaining that setup would begin winding down later. Her tone was polite, firm, unquestionable. As she walked, she felt grounded in a way she had not felt in years. Not because she had taken something away, but because she had finally stood where she belonged. She noticed her son watching her, seeing her differently now. Not as someone to work around, but as someone to answer to. She also noticed her daughter-in-law, quieter than before, eyes thoughtful. Whether understanding would come later or not was out of her control. What mattered was that the line had been drawn. She stepped back toward the house, choosing not to stay in the center of the gathering. She had said what needed to be said. The rest could unfold without her hovering. Inside, she sat at the kitchen table and let herself breathe. The familiar smell of the house, the worn wood beneath her hands, all reminded her of who she was. She did not feel guilty. She did not feel cruel. She felt right. For too long, she had mistaken silence for peace. Today taught her the difference. Peace required honesty. It required boundaries. And sometimes, it required saying no. As the afternoon passed, she heard the gradual sounds of things winding down. Fewer voices. Less movement. It was not dramatic. It was controlled. She knew there would be conversations later. Hard ones. Emotional ones. But she also knew she would no longer enter them from a place of doubt. The decision she made today was not just about a party. It was about reclaiming her place in her own life. She looked out the window at the land once more. The fields stretched wide and steady, unchanged by the day's events. They reminded her that strength did not need to be loud. She allowed herself a small smile. Not of victory, but of relief. She had chosen herself. Calmly. Clearly. And without apology. The decision had been made, and for the first time in a long while, she felt at peace with it. The afternoon light shifted as clouds drifted slowly across the sky. The farm looked the same as it always had, yet everything felt different. The music had stopped. Some guests lingered, unsure whether to stay or leave. Others quietly packed their things, sensing they had stepped into something private. She watched it all from the porch for a moment, not with regret, but with focus. What needed to happen next was not about appearances. It was about truth. She stood and walked back toward the yard, steady and composed. Her steps were unhurried. The ground beneath her felt familiar, solid, reminding her that she was exactly where she belonged. Her daughter-in-law stood near the tables, speaking in low tones to a few guests. Her posture was stiff, her movements sharp. She noticed her approaching and straightened, preparing herself. "This isn't the right time for this," her daughter-in-law said quickly, before she even reached her. "People are already uncomfortable." She stopped a few feet away. "There will never be a right time, if we keep avoiding it," she replied calmly. Her son moved closer, hovering nearby, clearly torn. She looked at him briefly, then back at his wife. "Let's talk," she said. "Right here. This is my home." Her daughter-in-law hesitated, glancing around, then nodded reluctantly. They stepped a short distance away, close enough to the house that the walls felt present, grounding the moment. For a second, no one spoke. She broke the silence. "I want to understand why you felt it was acceptable to plan an event here without telling me." Her daughter-in-law let out a breath. "I knew this would be difficult," she said. "You always have opinions. You always want things done a certain way. I didn't want a fight." She listened without reacting. "So instead," she said evenly, "you chose to exclude me." Her daughter-in-law's jaw tightened. "I chose to protect my family's peace." The words hung in the air. She nodded slowly. "Peace built on silence isn't peace. It's control." Her daughter-in-law bristled. "That's not fair. Everything becomes complicated when you're involved. You question decisions. You remind everyone that it's your farm." A small pause followed. The truth slipped out between complaints. "Yes," she said. "Because it is." Her daughter-in-law crossed her arms. "You like having that power." She considered the statement carefully. "I like having responsibility," she said. "There's a difference. Power doesn't come from ownership. It comes from being respected." Her son shifted uncomfortably. He looked between them, finally stepping forward. "She didn't mean it that way," he said, though his voice lacked confidence. She looked at him gently. "Then say what you mean," she said, returning her attention to his wife. "What is this really about?" Silence stretched. The sounds of guests packing up drifted faintly behind them. Her daughter-in-law's shoulders dropped slightly. The sharp edge in her voice softened. "I didn't want to feel small," she admitted. "Every time we're here, I feel like a guest in my own family. Like I have to ask permission for everything." She absorbed the words slowly. "This place has history," her daughter-in-law continued. "Your rules. Your memories. Your way of doing things. I wanted one day where I could just do things my way." She nodded. "And you thought the best way to do that was to erase me?" Her daughter-in-law looked away. "I didn't think you'd want to be involved," she said quietly. "You never like big events." "That was your assumption," she replied. "You never asked." Her son spoke again, voice strained. "I should have stopped it," he said. "I didn't want to choose sides." She turned to him fully now. "By staying silent you did choose," she said. "You chose convenience over honesty." The words were firm but not cruel. He swallowed hard, nodding. She returned her gaze to her daughter-in-law. "I understand wanting control. I understand wanting to feel important. But taking over someone else's home to prove that point crosses a line." Her daughter-in-law's eyes filled, not with tears, but with frustration. "I'm tired of feeling like everything belongs to you," she said. She answered without hesitation. "This land does belong to me. That doesn't mean there isn't room for you here. But room is made through respect, not force." The tension between them was thick but honest now. Years of unspoken feelings had finally surfaced. "I never wanted to compete with you," her daughter-in-law said softly. "Then stop trying to replace me," she replied. The simplicity of the statement seemed to settle something. Her daughter-in-law exhaled slowly, as if releasing a weight she had carried for too long. "I didn't realize how much resentment I was holding," she admitted. "I felt like I was always living in your shadow here." She nodded. "And I didn't realize how invisible I had become by staying quiet." For a moment, neither spoke. The farm stood around them, silent witness to the exchange. Her son looked at both of them, eyes tired. "I don't want this to keep dividing us," he said. "Then things have to change," she said. "Not later. Now." She laid out her boundaries clearly. Any future use of the farm would require her permission. Plans would be discussed openly. No decisions would be made behind her back. In return, she promised to listen, not to control, but to collaborate. Her daughter-in-law nodded slowly. I can agree to that, she said. But I need space to feel like I belong too. Belonging doesn't come from taking over, she replied. It comes from being invited, and inviting others in return. The confrontation did not end with hugs or apologies. It ended with understanding. Real, imperfect understanding. Around them, the last of the guests were leaving. The farm grew quieter with each passing minute. She felt tired but lighter. Speaking the truth had taken effort, but it had also lifted a burden she didn't realize she carried. Her daughter-in-law looked at her differently now. Not as an obstacle, but as a person with limits and history. This place matters to you, her daughter-in-law said. It always will, she replied. And I don't want to feel like an outsider here, her daughter-in-law added. Then don't make me one either, she said gently. They stood there for a moment longer, the familiar ground beneath their feet holding the weight of everything that had been said. The confrontation had not been loud. It had not been dramatic. But it had been honest. And sometimes, honesty was the most difficult ground of all. The farm grew quieter as the afternoon stretched on. What had started as a celebration now felt uncertain, as if the ground beneath it had shifted. Conversations faded into murmurs. Laughter came in short bursts, then stopped altogether. People sensed that something important had changed, even if they did not fully understand why. She stood near the house, watching the space where tables had once been busy. Some guests lingered near their cars, unsure whether to leave or wait. Others avoided eye contact, suddenly aware that they were standing in someone else's home without truly knowing the story behind it. The party had not ended with shouting or drama. It was ending with truth, and that truth carried more weight than noise ever could. Her son stood a few steps away from her, his shoulders slumped. The confidence he had shown earlier was gone. In its place was something heavier, regret mixed with realization. For the first time, he was no longer protected by excuses or silence. She turned toward him slowly. Her voice, when she spoke, was calm and steady. This didn't happen by accident, she said. And pretending it did only made things worse. He nodded, unable to meet her eyes at first. I know, he said quietly. I thought staying quiet would keep things smooth. She shook her head gently. Silence doesn't keep peace. It only delays the cost. Those words landed firmly. He looked up then, finally facing her. I didn't want to disappoint anyone, he said. You did, she replied. Just not the people you expected. There was no anger in her tone, only clarity. That made it harder to ignore. Around them, a few guests pretended to focus on packing gifts or folding chairs, but they listened all the same. The mood of the gathering had shifted from celebration to awareness. She did not raise her voice. She did not announce anything to the crowd. Still, her words carried. When you allow someone to be excluded, she continued, you teach others that it's acceptable. Especially when that person is the one who built what everyone is enjoying. Her son swallowed hard. I didn't think it would go this far. That's the problem, she said. You didn't think at all. You avoided. He nodded again, shame clear on his face. The truth had finally reached him. Not as blame, but as consequence. She turned slightly, addressing not just him, but the situation itself. This farm is not a backdrop, she said. It's not a free space to use when it's convenient. It's my home. The words were simple, but they carried authority. A few guests exchanged glances. Someone quietly said they hadn't realized the situation. Another apologized under their breath while gathering their things. She acknowledged none of it directly. This was not about making others uncomfortable. It was about drawing a line that should have been drawn long ago. She looked back at her son. You were raised here, she said. You know what respect looks like. Today, you chose comfort over responsibility. He took a breath, his voice unsteady. I see that now. Seeing it did not erase what had happened, but it mattered. She softened slightly, though her boundaries remained firm. I'm not asking to be placed above anyone. I'm asking not to be erased. That word, erased, hung in the air. Her daughter-in-law stood nearby, quieter than before. She did not interrupt. She listened. The celebration had completely stalled now. No one suggested restarting the music. No one pushed for things to continue as planned. The moment had passed. She addressed them both. Exclusion has consequences, she said. Not loud ones. Not dramatic ones. Real ones. She explained what those consequences were. Future gatherings would require open discussion. Decisions about the farm would never be made without her involvement. And if those boundaries were crossed again, access would simply not be given. There was no threat in her voice. Just certainty. Her son nodded slowly. That's fair, he said. Fairness. That was all she had ever wanted. The guests began leaving more decisively now. Goodbyes were short and quiet. Some thanked her for allowing them to come at all. Others avoided conversation entirely. Within an hour, the yard was mostly empty. Tables stood half-folded. Decorations were being taken down. The farm was returning to itself. She watched the last car pull away, dust settling behind it. The silence that followed felt different from before. It was not lonely. It was clean. Her son stood beside her. I'm sorry, he said at last. She nodded. I know you are. What matters is what comes next. He looked thoughtful, changed. I won't let this happen again. She hoped that was true. Hope, this time, rested on boundaries, not assumptions. She turned back toward the house, feeling tired but steady. The reckoning had happened. Not all wounds were healed, but they were finally visible. The truth had come out, and with it, a new understanding. The party was over. What remained was something more lasting, the knowledge that respect, once ignored, must be reclaimed. And she had done exactly that. By early evening, the farm was quiet again. The last car disappeared down the road, and dust settled slowly onto the gravel driveway. The laughter, the music, the hurried footsteps, all of it was gone. What remained was the sound of wind moving through the trees and the familiar stillness she had known for most of her life. She stood alone near the porch, watching the sky shift into softer colors. The day had been long, heavier than she expected, yet she did not feel drained. Instead, she felt grounded, as if something inside her had finally fallen into place. The party had ended early for some and continued elsewhere for others. It no longer mattered. What mattered was that her home had returned to itself. She walked slowly across the yard, noticing the small signs left behind. Flattened grass where chairs had been. A forgotten ribbon caught on a fence post. Footprints fading as the ground recovered. None of it upset her. The land would heal, just as it always had. Inside the house, she moved quietly, straightening a chair, wiping the counter, restoring order in small ways. These simple actions brought comfort. They reminded her that control did not come from force, but from care. She sat at the kitchen table and let herself think. She thought about what she had lost. The easy closeness she once assumed would always exist. The feeling that she would naturally be included, simply because she was family. That certainty was gone now. She also thought about what she had reclaimed. Her voice. Her authority. Her sense of place. For years, she had confused generosity with obligation. She had opened her home freely, believing kindness would always be returned with respect. Today taught her otherwise. Kindness without boundaries invited entitlement. She did not regret her decision. Not for a moment. Later that evening, her son came to the house. He knocked softly before entering, something he had not done in a long time. The small gesture did not go unnoticed. They sat across from each other, the space between them quiet but honest. "I didn't realize how much I had taken for granted," he said. She nodded. "Most people don't, until something forces them to look." He admitted that avoiding conflict had cost him more than he expected. He admitted that choosing what felt easiest had hurt the person who mattered most. She listened, but she did not rush to reassure him. "Things will be different now," she said. "Not worse. Just clearer." He accepted that. Her daughter-in-law did not come inside. She remained outside, speaking briefly before leaving. The distance between them was noticeable, but it was honest. Pretending nothing had happened would have been worse. Their relationship was changed, possibly strained. But it was no longer built on silence. In the days that followed, the farm returned fully to routine. Animals were fed. Repairs were made. The rhythm of work continued, steady and familiar. She noticed how differently she felt moving through her days. Lighter. More certain. She no longer questioned whether she was allowed to take up space. The relationship with her son became more deliberate. Conversations were slower, more thoughtful. He asked instead of assuming. He listened instead of avoiding it. With her daughter-in-law, things remained careful, polite, reserved. Trust, she knew, would take time, if it returned at all. And she was at peace with that. Not every relationship survives a reset. Some adjust. Some fractures. What mattered was that the imbalance had been corrected. One quiet afternoon, she stood again on the porch, looking out over the land. The fields stretched wide, unchanged by family conflict or celebration. They had endured storms far worse than this. She smiled softly, not with pride, but with understanding. Generosity did not mean disappearing. Love did not require silence. And respect was not something to be assumed, it was something to be practiced by everyone. The farm remained her legacy, but now it was also her boundary. Whatever the future held, she knew she would meet it differently. Present. Heard. And firmly in her own place. The quiet that settled around her was not empty. It was earned.